That's a lot of information. It's good information because one of the things while you were answering media in Washington, we were getting inundated with questions on everywhere. I think all beekeepers ended up with questions about that. They got here.
Yeah, the most likely explanation is basically an overwintering queen ended up in some kind of cargo, be it plant pots. Sometimes plants with soil are actually shipped over. They like to overwinter in a soil chamber. Hay bale, believe it or not, we actually import hay bales. I don't know why we do that. Wood chips. Could be, it's most likely something like that. There's a lot of used auto vehicles that come over, and those are some nice void spaces. For whatever reason, they unload those here. But the secondary thing is there's a distinct possibility, since this is a highly sought after delicacy in Asia, that someone who has emigrated here wants a taste of the homeland and has unwittingly smuggled in and started rearing their own so that they can enjoy eating fresh Asian giant hornet pupae at the right time of year to enjoy their traditional ceremonies. But we've actually had 2 people caught at the airport attempting to smuggle brood in over the years, one in Vancouver, British Columbia, one in Portland, Oregon. So that's a possibility, but that one's really less likely. More likely is an overwintering queen stowed away somewhere. We're a huge port. Actually we have 12 huge ports. They get ships from Japan. They get ships from Korea all the time. We get Asian gypsy moth all the time. It's the most likely scenario.
So the nest you found had a lot of queens. You said up to 200 queens, but only like 9 males. So the percentage of queens that actually get mated is probably not all that good.
That's absolutely correct. So what the literature says, Charlie, is that even though nests are capable of producing over 1,000 queens, ours was a small nest, by the way, a very small percentage of those will go on to overwinter successfully and successfully start a colony the next year. In fact, a lot of unmated queens overwinter and simply die out. So, I think I read the number 3% of anything that hatches out will actually successfully complete a nest the following year, but that may have been for a different species when I read that. But it's what I do know is they suffer a lot of loss during the overwintering process and the establishment of a colony the next year.
Sven, I have a question from the chat board here. This is from Priscilla in Harbor Creek. Do you recommend that we install the traps that you've described as an early warning detection program here in Pennsylvania?
That's actually a question for Karen Roccaseca, not for me. My personal thought is that every state should do a survey every 5 years or so, just to see what the heck is going on out there. But that's not my call for your state anymore. It used to be my call.
Okay. Karen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. We do set traps up. Our traps are a little bit different than Sven's. We use a jug trap that has brown sugar water in it, and we hang them up. Your inspector Kent Castor hangs some up in your area. And he's been doing it for a number of years. So it's an easy process, and that was our goal, to make it as easy and inexpensive as possible for anybody to be able to set them up.
Another question from a member, Cece from Grove City. Do you have European hornets in your area currently? Sven.
Interesting question. Paul Van Westendorp, the provincial apiarist for British Columbia, actually did collect one specimen of Vespa crabrow or European hornet on the Gulf Islands, which is kind of in between Nanaimo and where we were operating as a result of these surveys. And the city of Portland, Oregon had a trap turned in with a European hornet, but basically these have not moved much past the Mississippi. And so we would consider that an invasive species out here in the West because we don't have it. We don't have any species of true hornets native to Washington. So we would treat that just like we treat Asian giant hornet if we got it here in Washington.
Wow, that's interesting. Also, you mentioned that just putting a reducer or like we use mouse guards, that really wouldn't stop the invasion of the Asian hornet. You said because they coax them out. So is that with, how do they do that? Is it pheromones or they agitate them so they come out?
It's actually pretty interesting. When you're done listening to me drone on, there's some Nat Geo Wild clips that go over this in pretty great detail. But yeah, basically they'll mark the hive with their pheromone, attract a couple of their sisters, and the bees, in a desperate attempt to defend their hive, will actually pour out and try to attack them before they get inside. Now, in Asia, the other species, which we don't want here, Apis cerana, will actually coax the giant hornet to come in, then form a bee ball around it and basically cook it or asphyxiate it to death. Our bees here obviously don't have that behavior and have zero defense against Asian giant hornet. And if you saw Teddy Falls pictures, you can see it's, he was really upset about that one because that was his strongest hive, 30,000 plus bees. Was fine 2 days before. He comes out and they're all decapitated. Now, we couldn't prove that was Asian giant hornet, but you know what? No signs of a shrew doing it, no signs of anything else doing it. And by the way, nothing else really decapitates bees and piles them up outside the hive like that. So, it's just zero defense. So your only other attempts are to exclude them. Some other research they're working on is, it turns out, Apis cerana, so the Japanese honeybee, will actually gather plants and feces and smear it on the outside of the hive, kind of to mask it, I guess. And that's some research that came out of, I think it was Guelph earlier this year. And they're going to expand that research to see, if maybe something could be developed that you can just smear on the outside of your hive, which I think would be wonderful. But again, I'm only speculating in what the university folks want to do at this point. My job is to find the darn things and kill them. So.
Interesting. Another question from Cece here. Are you actively working with any Japanese, South Korean experts? And if so, are they using trackers to monitor distance range of the hornets?
So yes, we're working with Japanese colleagues. So the first thing was actually getting specimens, and this may sound kind of silly, but we only had the one. It went to USDA. We never got it back. And so we had a Japanese beekeeper go around to several of the Japanese universities. He gathered samples for us from trapping efforts that are going on and sent them to us. This was huge because we were able to make Riker mounts. I think Karen got one of them. And more importantly, we gave it to our legislative liaison, who walked across the street to our state legislature, showed it to every politician, and they were so blown away by the size of it and just looking at the thing. One of them actually got his wallet out and said, "How much do you need?" Oh. And so, the thing sells itself, especially when you can see it in person. And so that was the first thing they did to help. We've been in contact with the folks who were trapping, and they've been giving us some tips on what we should be using to lure them in different times of the year. Obviously, we used something that we already knew to be effective in Korea and Japan, and it did work here. Clearly, we got some come to traps, but we don't know if we have the best trap and lure, and we don't know how effective they are. So we'll continue to work with them. And it is my fondest hope that some of the research questions that we have posed to those working on them will be done overseas in collaboration with some of the researchers over there. But I don't, we're actually having our year end and planning wrap up meetings next week. So I don't have final answers on that, but I do know we've been in talks with some folks over there just to get some of our questions answered.
Excellent. Well, is there any more questions at all from anyone? I don't see any more from the chat. Gosh, this was really, really informative. The presentation was excellent. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to give you 10 stars on that. Double 5. It's usually
Thank you.
Always room for improvement, but boy, that was a great presentation. So informative, and you're a good speaker too. It was a really good outline. Charlie, you have any comments?
No, I really, really appreciate it. I don't know how we could get better information, and maybe we'll, it's good because out here on the east side of the country, it's all foreign to us. We don't expect to see it, but it sure gives us some answers. And, you know, like I say, we get the questions and we see the articles that pop up in the media, and it's like, it just emails start popping off in Facebook, and you're trying to settle it down to something rational. And I know a couple of us have really been working at it. So this is good. This is good information. And it kind of confirms a lot of what we were telling people already, is that it's, you know, it's not here. It's out there. But at the same time, we're going to really be depending on Washington State for information as this thing develops, because it sounds like it may not go away. Like, it's probably still going to be here.
We'll see. I'm actually cautiously optimistic. When we had the multiple attacks in 2019, I was really worried, especially as the information started to come in after the media releases. But then, you know, we actually did have the whole area pretty peppered with traps, and only the 31 detections. It seems like a localized population. And since we know about it and all of our beekeepers know to look for it, and basically the whole world tells us anytime anything happens, even remotely looking like an Asian giant hornet flies by them, you know, we think we have a pretty good bead on what's going on. And we think we actually got it early enough, maybe we can wrap our arms around it and just squash it out. A lot depends on Canada joining us as well, but they're working just as hard as we are. And, you know, as long as we stick with it and don't just give up, I think you may never have to deal with it. You just have to be vigilant to make sure that there are no reintroductions from overseas.
Great. Karen, I unmuted you there. Do you have any comments from your viewpoint? And then Charlie, we're going to go to your report after that. But Karen, can you come on next, say a word?
Sure. Thanks, Sven. That was really interesting. I think from Sven's talk, you can see how important local beekeepers are, and you're out there. You are, as everybody likes to say, boots on the ground. You see what's going on. You notice changes, and you notice other insects. So that really is so helpful, and it helps not only you and your bees, but also you know, the whole community, even the whole country, if you really want to go that way. But so it's good that you guys are interested, and good you're paying attention, and we're trying to help too, and be proactive. So I think it's a good collaboration of lots of people, and that'll help it be successful. And I hope we never get it too.
No, we just have to deal with the spotted lanternfly. That's a whole other topic. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Thanks for opening that wound.
Sven thought he was getting away from invasives for a little bit.
Yeah. So Karen, just while we have you here, I noticed myself, it's that time of year when every other year we get our licenses to renew. You want to mention that, the importance of that to the group?
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. If you have changes in your bee yards, different locations, that kind of thing, it really helps us if you let us know, or if your license is due, if you can go ahead and send that in, or do it online. That really helps us a lot. We're working now on, there's a hiring freeze, but we're working on getting the apiary inspectors back under an exemption. They were late starting last year, obviously, and everything went fine. They have some strict protocols that they're supposed to follow, but like everybody else, you know, with the virus, because we don't want anybody at risk. But when you register and keep your information up to date, it really helps us. If there's a problem in somebody's yard and it may impact you, at least we can find you. Otherwise, we can't find you. We can't help you. So it's not, there's only 8 of us if you count the 7 inspectors and me. There's just 8 of us, and we're not out to get anybody or make life horrible for anyone. We truly are trying to help you and the industry and the honeybees. So by you registering and keeping it up to date, that really helps us and saves us a lot of time, and it's greatly appreciated.
Can I,
Yeah.
I actually want to point something out along those lines. When we first got Asian Giant Hornet, we went to the feds to ask for money. And one of the first questions they asked us, well, what does your apiary industry look like out there? We don't have an apiary inspection program or a Karen out here. That was decided by the beekeepers several years ago. And that program was abolished out here. And all we have is a $10 every couple of years thing, sort of similar to Pennsylvania. And that is just basically money that goes to WSU for research, and still only 3% of known beekeepers register. So when I went to the feds to say, you need to take care of this problem because our industry is in trouble, they said, well, but you only have like 30,000 beehives in Washington. Huh. Because that's all that was reported by the beekeepers. So from us to you, we can't help you. The researchers can't do anything for you if you don't at least have your hives counted. That was actually kind of a huge point of contention. I actually brought this up at our state beekeepers meeting here in Washington, and it turns out we have a little more than 30,000 hives here in Washington because people started registering, because this is one of the important things that happen when you do stand up and make sure that people know you exist. So they were able to then see after that we do have an industry here, and then they were able to send money in. And honestly, the second shot of money came in because we got some more people registered, and that was huge. So just throwing that out there to back Karen up. She's not sitting around plotting evil things against you or anything like that. She's really trying to help. I promise you. So
that actually, the Washington not having an apiary program became an issue a few years ago in Pennsylvania when a beekeeper wanted to bring a queen in. You know, the good queens bring in a queen from Washington State, but they need to be inspected. So maybe Karen can explain this better than me, but basically there was no way legally that Karen could allow that queen into the state because we didn't have like a reciprocal program. And so there couldn't be inspected before the bees arrived. And that was, so that's a hang up in our bee law as well, which is something we're still working to address. And that'll probably be addressed, as well as the other thing Sven mentioned, that like the giant hornet, there's no authority to deal with that on paper. So our bee law may change, as maybe become a pollinator law or some other title to it. We're not sure yet, but there's a lot of things in the mix here.
Yeah, back to Karen. What percentage do you feel that we are in Pennsylvania joining the PA Beekeeping Association? Is it 50% of beekeepers, or do you know offhand?
You mean how many people I think are not registered?
That you say it that way too.
Truthfully, I'm not really sure. Sometimes I think it's as high as 50%, but I don't really think it's that high. I'm not sure, because when the inspectors are talking to a beekeeper, oftentimes they'll say, oh, there's my neighbor has bees and they're not registered.
Okay.
You know, so it's really difficult to say. Any guess I made would be wrong, I'm sure.
So there's actually 3 levels now to clarify for new people. There's a local bee, which is the Northwestern Pennsylvania Bee Association. There's a Pennsylvania State Bee Association, and then there is a registration for beekeepers. That's through the Agricultural Department? Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. The Pennsylvania bee law requires that anyone who manages honeybees be registered, and the registration is $10, and it's good for up to 2 years. It expires December 31st of whatever year. Like people registering now, their $10 fee would include a license good all of 2021 and all of 2022.
And I hear a rumor that that might be raised because that fund actually goes for the inspectors. And I always feel it. I love having the inspector coming over because I learned so much. And then in case if there's any breakout of American foul brood or something, the whole local area is notified. So, you know, that's really a benefit, especially when it comes to disease.
Well, the fee, it is put into the general fund, but the general fund also pays for the inspectors and you know, their use of their trucks and their equipment and their salary and that kind of thing. So it isn't a direct trade-off, which is probably a good thing, or we would have a hard time.
Exactly.
Even though we're one of the most, we try and be very thrifty and as Sven knows, we reuse a lot of things and we try and be good stewards of the money that we have. We are not wasteful at all.
Yeah, the $10 doesn't even probably cover the paperwork. So, okay, again, I want to thank the participation. We do have a